Jenna, I am so glad that we get to have this time together. So before we jump in, can you tell everybody in the world what your name is and what your title is and the school that you work at?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm Jenna Cullipane Hege. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Institutional Research and Analytics at Austin Community College.
You have had quite the whirlwind since you have had this new chancellor. And it's interesting because every time I talk to Russell, he talks about the impact of what you and your department have done, have had on the institution and his foundation of getting started with this work. And as we just kind of had casual conversation, we started to really dive into the unique skill that you have with data storytelling. And the clients that we have at Swim, I think this is the biggest area of growth and opportunity, is understanding how to tell the story to get buy-in. And somehow, some way you have really figured it out. So I wanted to just have you kind of talk and we can have a conversation to figure out how in the hell did you do it? Is that okay?
It's exceedingly kind, and yes, happy to have the conversation. Thank you.
So tell me, first, I think we should start at the beginning. What does data storytelling mean in higher ed to you? Talk to me about what that even means.
So, data storytelling, the reason I think about the importance of data storytelling is it started with some facts. I can't help myself. I have to start with some facts. So, what it comes down to is that data is really emotional for people. People have all sorts of responses to data. And so, was looking at this data literacy project and a few stats. 75% of people feel really overwhelmed or uncomfortable when they have to deal with data in their day-to-day job. Like, they don't generally love it unless they're a big data person. And about a third of people will procrastinate for more than an hour if they have to do a data task. Like, it's just not my first favorite thing I want to do. So understanding that people come to this work with like, oh, this is maybe accountability, or this is something I don't understand, or something I don't want to have to deal with. When you start just giving them some stray facts, it's not going to add up to a lot of meaning. You really have to do the work to help them connect in a more emotional way, and in a way that they're going to remember and understand how to take action. If you can't help them link to the action, then it's not a very meaningful conversation. So that's where data storytelling can really help move things forward.
So you said connect in an emotional way, and I think that the best way to really give a concrete example of that is the data summit that the college had to really kick off the theory of change. So my question for you is, when you created the data summit alongside Russell, you really did a fantastic job of keeping the student's voice at the forefront all of the time. So before we jump into the data summit, there was a lot of work that took place. We did a lot of digging in before we were even ready to perform at the summit. So can you talk through what was the reason we thought that we needed this summit in the first place? And then how did you bring the students to the forefront during the summit so that people weren't as anxious as you were talking about earlier?
Yeah. So we decided it was time for a data summit. We were probably a good, 8, 9 months in when we had the data summit. So we had spent a lot of time grounding in the data before we got to the data summit. And Russell does this really beautiful thing in how he guides an institution. And so he'll start by just noting an observation, like, here's an interesting thing we saw in the data. And then it becomes helping people understand that there might be a problem associated with that. So the first time you kind of bring it up, it's sort of neutral. Second time you're bringing it up, you're really understanding like, hey, this is a challenge that might be going on before you get to, okay, here's what we're going to do about it. We often race to the, here's what we should go do about it. And you haven't brought anybody in the institution along on the journey to help them understand how an observation goes to a problem and then goes to a solution. You're much more
Yeah.
interested and share ownership around the action when you've been on that journey. And so that's kind of what happened in the lead up to the data summit, is that we were starting to propose a set of strategies aligned to some big challenges that we'd observed in the institution. And it took a little time for all those discrete challenges to gel into a more coherent strategy. And that's the point where the data summit came in, when we had a clear understanding of problem and starting to tee up solutions.
And I think a lot of times where institutions tend to go awry, they have an institutional effectiveness or institutional research team, and they have all of this information, and they say, let's have a data summit and bring everybody together and talk about that data. Where I think where we really hit the nail on the head and saw the magic was we knew that we wanted to bring everybody together, but to your point, we had multiple listening sessions. I mean, we went to every single campus. We had multiple surveys. We spoke to community leaders. We brought the students in to be able to understand what their value propositions were for the institution. For us to then take all of the data that you provided, all of the information that the community and the students and the faculty and staff said, to be able to say, and this is what our theory of change and the components need to be sure that we can meet that challenge and that goal. And I think that is the key piece that is so important. Is I'm a firm believer of you have to go slow to go fast. And we took the time. Those 9 months was probably the most credibility building, rallying, transparency foundational setting that most institutions tend to skip over and go straight into that summit. And so from all of that information, you were able to design this summit, and you kicked it off with something that I thought was so amazing. And you talked about you created a persona for the students. And I feel like that's a really cool story of how you created the persona. So can you share a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So we knew we wanted to build a student persona because we wanted people to be able to connect really personally with mission and any hard change work that was coming up. We wanted to be able to like see the face of that student and really have that in our minds as we were thinking about design and improvement work. And so we started by looking at, we did a look back at 5 years of data when Russell came in to say, here's all the stuff that we know. Here's some stuff that worked. Here's some stuff that we thought would have worked, but didn't work so well. And we really took all of that together. And if you cook, about like making a reduction, it was like we had to put all the stuff in the pot and then we reduced it and then we reduced it again. We had to get to like, what is the core of this thing? And so one of those is the actual theory of change. And one of those was the student persona. And so for the student persona, we had a lot of qualitative work that we had from focus groups and surveys. And so we said, who is our average student? And let's be really research based about that. And so our student is Ashley, and she's 26 years old, our average age student. She's a woman of color. She supports her family with caregiving between 11 and 25 hours. She's working part-time, a couple of jobs. And she's really looking to make her life better through education. And she's looking for her people. She's looking to connect. And so these are all things that we knew was, from a really sound research base. And then even the name, we went to our student records and said, what's our average student name? What's the most popular name? And Ashley was the one that emerged both for males and females in the state of Texas. We had both males and females and very representative of all of our large race ethnicity groups. And so we knew in the end, this is Ashley and she's a real person and we see her in the halls every day.
It's such an amazing way to approach it. I have a question. So people always talk about like, I really want my data to be transformative, and I really want to be blah 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 blah. All these words. I think what I'd love for you to help me with is how, if you had to think about the story that you told in the most transformative way, where the entire institution can get around it and execute on it based on the story you told. What would you say that was in like specifics? What would you say that was in terms of changing mindsets and policy and so on and so forth?
So it's a piece of the theory of change is the one that I'm kind of drawn to tell you about. And so our overall theory of change is that when students start strong, enroll full time, meet basic needs, and a culture of belonging and connection, they will succeed. And so we have a big North Star goal, get to 70% completion and transfer success. So of all of those, I think we had ideas about what a strong start would look like and really kind of building momentum in that first year. But enroll full time was the one where it took a little work to get people to it, because I think at first there was kind of an objection to, hey, you don't know our students at all. We've got all these part-time students, and it's because they have complicated lives, and are you sort of missing that? So that was an initial reaction we kind of had to work through. And so what we came to discover is that we were looking at a variety of initiatives. And I told you we did this 5-year kind of meta-analysis of everything that looked really promising in our data. And so what we saw is that we had major challenges around strategic scheduling. Students were telling us in a variety of different ways they could not get the courses that they needed. It was difficult to find them. They couldn't find them on the same campus at the right times. It was a major challenge. We hadn't really taken that issue up. We also heard that students were having affordability challenges. It is difficult to pay for all the things, including textbooks and tuition and all the things in an expensive city like Austin. We also heard, hey, we have tutoring services, but there's not great uptake. People aren't really taking advantage of them. But one of the challenges to taking more classes is if students don't feel like they're going to be successful, they won't enroll for that extra class. And then finally, 8-week courses. We've dabbled in 8-week courses, but where we've done a pilot on a full campus, we saw major increases in full-time enrollment. So what we came to discover is like these things actually all kind of fit together. When students can get the courses they need, when they can afford to take an extra class, when they get the academic support they need, and they can do it in accelerated classes, all of that combined becomes a really powerful strategy for increasing academic momentum. And ACC, we learned from our peers, we were way an outlier on the percentage of our students who are part-time. So what we digested all of this to be is, hey, we're always going to have part-time students. Our students are always going to have complex lives, but we're actually making it as hard as possible for them to take even one more class.
Right.
So we have to own the parts of the system that we control to make that as simple and easy and meet students where they are. And by doing that, we will start to tick up that percent of students who can take just one more or get all the way to full-time.
And so, you know, how, if you had to think about, you know, some of the mistakes that you've made when you are trying to get an institution like Austin Community College to act differently. Do you have some examples? Do you feel comfortable sharing that? Because I mean, I'm like, oh, you're so great. Now tell me when you messed up.
Of course, of course. No, this is plenty of mistakes to draw from. I think when I first started in this role, one thing I noticed is that we were kind of burying people in too much data. And so we kind of had the field of dreams approach. If you build it, they will come. We just had a website with massive amounts of data, but we didn't guide people to any sense making about it. So one, we were sort of hoping and praying they would go look at it. And then if they looked at it, that they would see something interesting out of it and then be able to convert it into some kind of action. Like those are all very wishful dreams.
Right.
And so the shift was around like, we have a big responsibility to be translators and guiders through the data. And that is with full and deep respect for the expertise in the classroom, in advising other areas where we are partners, but we can help draw out like, here's what we're seeing in the data. How does that match? Or what questions does that raise for you? And so we had to move to a much more engaged dialogue with people about data. It was not post it and forget about it. That was a big whiff. So
well, I think that we've all been there. I think my last question for you is, you know, we have, if you were talking to other IR teams or other IR leaders and you wanted to, and they were to ask, I have this unbelievable amount of data. I have it and I am positive there's a there. What advice would you give them on how to take that information and translate it into a story to evoke the rallying cry that you've been able to create at Austin Community College?
So one thing that my team and we practice this together because it is not a natural skill. So I have an incredible team. They are extremely talented analysts and leaders. But we are often in production mode. We are, you know, we got 1 million data requests coming in. We've got annual reports that need to get done. So we are charging hard, but we will take time in all hands meetings to look at some interesting data and say, okay, what's the headline? And so we do this exercise where we'll be in small groups and people will say, you know, I noticed this trend or I noticed this trend, but it has to be something bigger than that. What is and then we come back to this, what is the so what, now what? Now that you've looked at this, who cares? What audience even cares at all about this? Because they're busy. They got 100 other things to do. So they've got to really care about this. And then now what? Like, what would you expect someone to think about or do differently because they've seen this? And this takes time. Like, this is a 30-minute exercise where we will go around the room and we'll say, like, what do you see? What do you see? And then we'll end up with, okay, actually, the big story is blah. And don't bury the headline, as they say. And so that's like kind of the big thing. And then we'll have a couple of data points that support it, but start there. And that's kind of that can be a whole conversation with an audience of stakeholders that you want to engage.
Wow. So what? Now what? Who cares? Right?
Yeah.
I love it. Jenna, thank you so much for spending time with me today. And I truly am so impressed with how much amazing work that you are doing with your team and with the entire ACC district. So thank you so much for giving me your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Trimeka.